The heat rolled across the flatlands like an invisible tide, dense, humming, and dry. It clung to every breath, crept under shirt collars, and baked the gravel beneath the polished shoes of executives who were clearly not from around here. It was launch day in Des Moines, and GreenCore had spared no expense. Tents were erected in precise rows. Trays of artisanal pastries sat untouched beneath white linens. Investors milled around, sipping espressos, while engineers huddled by sleek tablets under pop-up shade canopies. At the heart of it all stood the company's latest marvel, the TerraTech GX9, an AI-integrated combine harvester worth over $1.2 million. And overseeing it like a conductor before a symphony was Douglas Vance, the CEO of GreenCore. Vance wasn't a farmer. That much was obvious from the way he winced whenever a breeze kicked up a swirl of dust. His suit, gunmetal gray and perfectly tailored, looked like it had never seen dirt. His shoes gleamed in the sun, and his voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a whip. "This machine," he announced earlier, "isn't just the future. It's the future with brains. It learns, it adapts, it thinks." A round of polite applause followed. Vance had smiled then, pleased, and stepped aside as the demonstration began. That was 10 minutes ago. Now, the machine sputtered, groaned, and choked like an animal in pain. Then came a mechanical whine, sharp and unnatural, followed by a bone-jarring clang, and the combine stopped. Dead. Silence. The kind of silence that comes when something expensive breaks in front of people who sign checks for it. One investor laughed awkwardly. Another tugged at his collar. But Vance? He didn't move for 3 full seconds, then snapped. "Jesus Christ, what the hell just happened?" His voice cracked across the demo field. One of the engineers flinched. The man, mid-30s, sweat already pooling under his collar, rushed to the side panel of the combine. "Could be a sensor glitch, maybe a calibration loop error." "Fix it," Vance barked. "Now!" The engineer tapped the console. "Unplug something." Plugged it back in. Nothing. Vance's jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened around the tablet in his hand. "This is a disaster," someone muttered. He turned, scanning for anyone else to blame. And then he saw them. Across the gravel lot near the catering tents. A group of local teenagers and part-time farmhands who'd helped with setup. Their jeans were frayed, boots scuffed. One of them had straw poking out of his cap. Farm kids. Vance stormed over. His eyes zeroed in on one of them, a slim, dark-skinned boy in a denim shirt and mud-streaked overalls. A streak of oil ran down the kid's right forearm. He looked maybe 17. "You!" Vance pointed. The boy looked up. His expression was calm. Still. "Go find someone who knows what the hell they're doing. I don't care if it's your uncle or your cousin or the guy who changes your tractor tires. I need someone who understands machines." There was a pause, then the boy stepped forward. Not hurried, not hesitant, just forward. "I can fix it." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut clean through the murmurs around them. Vance raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I said I can fix it, sir." The crowd turned toward him. Some engineers exchanged glances. One of them snorted. The boy wasn't tall. His sleeves were rolled up to the elbow, his boots caked in dry earth. His hands looked like they'd grown around wrenches. But what stood out the most were his eyes, clear, direct, and wholly unafraid. Vance let out a short, humorless laugh. "Kid, this isn't your granddad's lawnmower. That's a $1.2 million combine harvester with terrain mapping software and dynamic AI. I understand. Do you?" Vance stepped closer. "Because I don't need another intern blowing a fuse or frying the CPU." The boy didn't blink. "I'm not trying to blow a fuse. I'm trying to fix what your guys couldn't." There was an audible shift in the crowd, half scoffs, half surprise. One engineer muttered, "Is this a joke?" Another said, "He'll electrocute himself." The boy turned to Vance again. "Can I look at it?" Vance looked him up and down. "Fine," he snapped. "Knock yourself out." The boy gave a single nod. His name was Malik Reeves, and this was the first time anyone outside his hometown would remember it. Malik moved like he already knew the combine. Not in general, that one specifically. He crouched by the panel, brushed the dust away from the edge, and reached into his back pocket for a small, beat-up multi-tool. It clicked open with a metallic snap. He didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. With quiet confidence, he popped the side panel, revealing a maze of wires, modules, and diagnostic boards. His fingers moved with a rhythm that spoke of long nights under dim lights, working in barns where the only air conditioning was a cracked window and the hum of crickets. He checked the voltage on the power relay, eyed a feedback loop, tapped twice against a copper terminal. Then he did something none of the GreenCore engineers had done. He disconnected a secondary port, crossed it with a bridge relay, and held down the reset trigger for 10 long seconds while flicking a hidden switch. Then he stood. "Try it now," he said. Vance raised an eyebrow, gesturing to one of the engineers who climbed into the cab and pressed the ignition. With a low whir, the combine came to life. Not just barely, not stuttering, fully alive. Panels lit up green, sensors recalibrated. The display blinked in sequence like dominoes falling into place. The crowd froze. Then, a sound none of them had expected. Applause. First polite, then scattered, then stunned. The machine was working. One investor leaned to another. "What the hell did that kid just do?" An engineer was already leaning over the panel. He bypassed the default firmware startup, rerouted the failsafe. "I didn't even know that was possible." Malik just wiped his hands on his jeans and stood back. Vance stared at him. "Name again?" Malik Reeves." The last name hit like a brick. Vance blinked. "Reeves. Wait, Reeves? As in Elijah Reeves?" Malik didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence answered for him. For a long moment, the name just hung there, like dust suspended in golden sunlight. Reeves, Elijah Reeves. The crowd around the combine had gone quiet again. Not awkward this time. Not curious. Just watchful. Even the engineers who had moments ago rolled their eyes at Malik now stood straighter, alert, cautious, aware that something far more complex had just entered the room, and it wasn't the machine. Douglas Vance narrowed his eyes. "Elijah Reeves," he said slowly, tasting the name like something bitter. "That your father?" Malik didn't flinch. "Yes." The reaction wasn't dramatic. No gasps, no falling coffee cups. But the understanding rippled. One of the older investors, gray at the temples, wearing an overpriced polo embroidered with the GreenCore crest, leaned toward a younger man and whispered, "The Elijah Reeves? From the old control system scandal?" "He's still around?" the other replied, barely moving his lips. "Thought he disappeared. I thought GreenCore buried him." Vance heard none of that, but he felt it. He had lived through it. The moment 10 years earlier, when Elijah Reeves, a backcountry genius with no formal degree, had leaked the technical schematics of an internal controller, GreenCore was preparing to mass produce. It wasn't sabotage, not in the way the media had painted it. Reeves had done it to protect farmers, people like himself, from a dangerously flawed design that had been quietly approved to meet quarterly profits. And GreenCore had punished him for it, silently, strategically, and completely. No interviews, no statements, Vance had told his board at the time. Just erase the man. And now, his son had just saved the demo in 5 minutes, using nothing but a multi-tool and instincts that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Vance stepped closer to Malik. The boy didn't retreat. He stood like a shadow cast from iron. "You've been working on these types of machines long?" Malik gave a shrug, but it wasn't careless. "Since I was 9. You study engineering?" "I learned from my father." "Still fixing old tractors out on 58? Malik's mouth curled slightly, a trace of dry amusement. "Still rebuilding things the world thinks are done for." That line landed somewhere deep inside Vance's chest, but he wasn't ready to name what it was. Regret? Guilt? Or something worse? Respect. He turned to his assistant. "Get me Reeves's number, address, anything." "Sir," she whispered, eyes wide. "Are you sure?" After last time, he didn't respond. He was already reaching for his phone. What Vance didn't know was that someone else had beaten him to it. As the sun began to lower over the cornfield horizon, turning the demo tents golden and drawing long shadows across the gravel, Malik Reeves stood by the fence line with his phone. A text already sent. Fixed it. They saw, back at the edge of Polk County, in a barn that looked like it belonged in another century, a man in a faded flannel shirt put down a wrench and glanced at his buzzing phone. Elijah Reeves read the message. Just 2 lines. He didn't smile, didn't even nod. He just wiped his hands on a rag, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Not with anticipation, but with the resigned calm of a man who always knew the truth would surface. Eventually. Outside, a black SUV turned onto the gravel drive. Vance had arrived. The barn looked the same as it did the day Elijah had walked away from the world. Rusted grain carts leaned beside a patch tractor. Vines crept along the siding. But inside was a cathedral of creation. Workbenches lined with old processors and new prototypes. Open motors. Pulley systems rigged with copper wire. It was chaos, but deliberate chaos. Vance stepped from the SUV alone. He didn't wear the same sharp suit, but he still walked like a man used to giving orders. Elijah didn't get up. He sat on the edge of a wooden porch, one hand around a thermos of sweet tea, the other resting across his knee. Vance stopped a few feet away. "You really threw it all away," he said quietly. Elijah glanced at him. Number I just knew it wasn't worth keeping. The wind stirred a loose tarp behind the barn. "Your son," Vance said, "he fixed the machine in front of everyone. Better than my entire engineering team." "I know. You trained him well." "I didn't train him," Elijah corrected. "I taught him. There's a difference." There was silence again, the kind of silence that held weight. Vance cleared his throat. "I want to offer him something, a real opportunity, full scholarship, internship. He can come work for us, lead a team even." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Because he saved your showcase? Because he deserves it? Or because your board needs a story that doesn't make you look like fools?" Vance winced, but Elijah didn't press. He just took a sip of tea and said, "If you're offering something real, don't pitch it to me. Talk to Malik." "I plan to." "Then let me give you advice," Elijah said, standing slowly. "Don't treat him like some backwater miracle. He's not a trick pony. He's a mind. Maybe better than mine. If you bring him in right. Or not at all." Vance nodded. It wasn't an agreement, just understanding. Then Elijah added, "And don't think an offer erases what you did to me." "I don't." "Good." They stood there, 2 men who hadn't spoken in 12 years, each with their own scar tissue. But there was no yelling, no closure, just the sound of a screen door creaking in the wind. Vance walked back to the SUV. As he reached the door, Elijah called out one final thing. "He doesn't do this for your company, Douglas. He does it for the ones you forgot, the ones you priced out. Don't ever confuse that." Vance didn't respond. He just drove off. Back home, Malik sat on the kitchen table, staring at a neatly folded letter. His father slid it toward him. From GreenCore, full scholarship, tuition, living stipend, internship next summer. Malik didn't touch it. After a long moment, he asked, "Did they say sorry?" "Nope." "Then why now?" His father shrugged. "Maybe because now they can't ignore you." Malik looked up. "I don't know if I want it." "Why?" "Because I don't know if it's real or if I'm just their next shiny apology." Elijah didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "It might be both. Doesn't mean you can't take it, just means you decide what you make of it." There was silence again, but this one was different, not full of doubt, full of thought. Eventually, Malik picked up the letter and said nothing, not yet, but he was thinking. 6 weeks later, Malik stood on the far edge of a campus that didn't look like it belonged to the same world he came from. The GreenCore Innovation Center sat like a spaceship parked in the middle of the Iowa plains. Sleek glass panels, sensor-activated doors, carbon-neutral landscaping. The air smelled like synthetic citrus and ambition. Inside, everything buzzed with motion. Engineers in matching polos, touchscreen whiteboards covered in diagrams, high-end espresso machines humming softly in break rooms where people said words like scalable impact and data fluidity. Malik walked in wearing boots still stained from back home and a second-hand backpack with a broken zipper. He didn't smile when they handed him his ID badge. He didn't marvel when they showed him to a desk with his name on a glass placard. He just nodded, muttered a thank you, and kept moving. He wasn't here for decor. He was here to see what they'd hidden behind it. And maybe, if they'd let him, he'd make something better. His first few weeks were quiet, not because Malik lacked ideas, but because he listened. He watched how the teams operated, how the older engineers dismissed each other in the politest condescending tones. He noticed how people avoided eye contact when they talked about Elijah Reeves, if they talked about him at all. He noticed how the same people who had scoffed when he fixed the combine now nodded politely and called him Mr. Reeves, like they were afraid of what he might prove next. Malik didn't react. He just worked, and slowly the work began to notice him. One afternoon, a lead developer on the advanced systems team, a sharp, pale guy named Geller, pulled him aside after a code review. "Who wrote this logic patch?" "I did," Malik replied. "You reversed a failsafe to push voltage flow upstream." "Yeah, that's not in the handbook." "I know." Geller stared for a second. "And it didn't crash the chain?" "Nope, it made it faster." He left it at that. Later that week, Geller asked if Malik wanted to sit in on the next-gen AI model brainstorm. Just listen. Maybe offer input. Malik said yes. The next-gen project was GreenCore's future. The old combine, that was yesterday's revolution. The future was autonomous soil turnover machines, fully driverless units that use geodata, seed memory, and localized weather patterns to adjust planting on the fly. It sounded good on paper, but in practice, they were building for spreadsheets, not fields. And Malik said so. Not loudly, not arrogantly, just directly. "These modules won't hold up in rain-to-dry back cycles," he said during one session. "The housing's too fragile. It'll crack in the first freeze-thaw." Geller blinked. "How do you know?" "Because we tried that at the farm. My dad built one out of salvaged modules. It lasted 3 weeks." The room went still. One engineer scoffed under his breath. Geller didn't. He leaned in. "What would you use instead?" And that was how it started. By week 8, Malik wasn't the kid who fixed a machine anymore. He was an engineer, unofficially, but real. Even the senior team came around, begrudgingly at first, then curiously, then, finally, genuinely. Darius Kenner, the VP of Advanced Systems, showed up one day with coffee and a simple question. "You want a seat at the table? Or your own table?" Malik shrugged. "Depends who's sitting." But it wasn't all progress. Not every door opened. Not every hallway welcomed. There were whispers, tension. Malik would walk into a room and feel it settle. Eyes flicking up from screens, conversations stopping half a beat too soon. Some engineers treated him like a sideshow, others like a threat. One even said it to his face. "You know you're only here because your daddy scared the hell out of GreenCore once." Malik didn't answer. He just smiled. That night, he went home and designed a new relay sequence for the next-gen firmware that reduced energy waste by 27%. The update was pushed to beta 3 days later. No one said thank you. He didn't need them to. It was on a Sunday night, quiet, rainy, the office mostly empty, that Malik stayed late to test a reroute on the navigation stack. He was alone in the lab, the hum of the prototype machine pulsing gently behind him, the light from his monitor throwing shadows across the walls. That's when Geller walked in, his face pale, lips tight. "You might want to sit for this." Malik didn't move. "They want to do a media push, a PR story, about you, about your dad. The narrative is—" Geller trailed off. Malik waited. "They want to tell the world that GreenCore found its next genius in the fields of America. Full circle stuff. Redemption arc. A black kid from a forgotten town saves the company's future. It's marketing." Malik leaned back in his chair. "That's not my story." "I know." He was quiet. Then after a long moment, Malik said, "I'll write my own version." What he asked for wasn't fame, it was funding. He proposed a side project, a harvester built not for prestige but for access, a stripped-down, cost-efficient unit that used simple mechanics, easily replaceable parts, and firmware you could update without a PhD. He called it the Red Clay Project, a nod to the earth back home, the color of it after rain. He pitched it to the board. They declined. Unscalable. Off-brand. Not polished enough. So he started building it anyway. Nights. Weekends. Mornings before the campus cafeteria even opened. He used scrap parts, recycled code. He called in favors, asked his dad to test early modules. No press, no camera crews. Just hands in oil, ideas on napkins, and a mind that wouldn't stop. By the time spring rolled around, Malik had a working prototype. Not flashy, not fast, but functional, efficient, beautiful in its truth. When he showed it at a small agricultural fair in Tulsa, just a dusty lot with food trucks and flapping paper banners, farmers lined up. Not journalists, farmers. A man in his 60s, eyes weathered from years in the sun, pointed at it and asked, "You built this?" "Yes, sir." "Built it for who?" "For folks like you." The man nodded. "That's what I thought." Later, as the fair quieted and the sun fell behind the treetops, Elijah Reeves sat beside his son on the tailgate of a borrowed truck. They didn't say much, just watched. Eventually, Elijah asked, "You proud of it?" Malik looked out over the field. "I am. Not just the machine, the reason for it." Elijah took a sip of his tea and smiled, just a little. "You should be." That night, Malik got a call. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Then he checked it anyway. It was Douglas Vance. "I've heard about your little project," the voice said. "We want to license it. Bring it under the GreenCore banner." Malik didn't return the call. He didn't need to. His silence was loud enough. It had been almost a year since the machine died in that sun-beaten field in Des Moines. Since then, Malik Reeves had done the one thing no one at GreenCore expected. He disappeared. Not physically. He was still in the system, still working under contract. But he stopped attending board presentations, stopped replying to their opportunity emails, and left the glossy stages and spotlight interviews to the executives who thought progress was a podium. Instead, he built. He went back to the barn, the same one where his father, Elijah, once taught him how to strip a gear shift bare and rebuild it with only 2 working fingers and a prayer. The same barn where Red Clay Project was born, not on a CAD screen, but on a coffee-stained blueprint sketched on the back of a seed catalog. Malik didn't want cameras. He wanted torque. He didn't want applause. He wanted answers. So when the second prototype was ready, he didn't launch it at a convention. He rolled it out on a dirt lot behind the co-op in Vinton. It was raining that day. No one cared. Dozens of farmers, black, white, Latino, broke, tired, real, stood under umbrellas and watched as the Red Clay 2.0 made a perfect soil pass over half-flooded terrain. No AI, no gimmicks, just hardware and heart. After the demo, a woman named Mrs. Janice, 72 years old, whose family had farmed the same 3 acres for 3 generations, walked up to Malik with tears in her eyes. "I can finally afford to retire my old John Deere," she said. Malik didn't know what to say. He just hugged her. That was enough. But GreenCore wasn't done with him. Not yet. They called again. This time it wasn't Vance. It was someone younger, smoother, a director of narrative strategy. She didn't talk like a CEO. She talked like a marketer. "We believe your journey is one of resilience, representation. We'd like to feature you in our Voices of Innovation campaign." Malik asked a single question. "Did you fix the control algorithm on the GX9? She blinked. "I'm not sure what that means." "Exactly." Then he hung up. The next week, a sleek black car pulled up outside the Reeves barn. Out stepped a tall man in a blue-gray blazer, clean-shaven, polished shoes, and a clipboard. He introduced himself as a representative of the acquisition team. "We'd like to purchase the Red Clay Project. Full buyout, lifetime royalties. You'd never have to work again." Elijah Reeves was repairing a rusted sprayer behind the barn. He wiped his hands and approached the man slowly. Malik stood beside his father. "You're offering my son freedom from work?" Elijah asked. The rep smiled. "Yes, sir." Elijah looked him in the eye. "Where we come from, work is not the problem. The lack of dignity in it is." the man faltered. With all due respect, sir, this is a generous offer. No, Malik cut in, voice even. It's a buyout to bury a threat. You don't want to build better. You want to own better. The rep's smile faded. You'd rather struggle than succeed? Malik stepped forward. Number, I'd rather succeed on my own terms. And I'm not alone anymore. He wasn't. Word had gotten out. A small group of young mechanics from across the Midwest, black, indigenous, rural poor, had been quietly following Malik's designs. They were building their own variations of red clay using recycled motors and open source code. No one taught them how. No one gave them funding. Malik had posted everything online. Blueprints, schematics, video breakdowns, no passwords, no licensing, just knowledge. He remembered what his father once told him. If you can't explain it to a man with grease on his hands, you don't understand it yourself. So he explained it all, and the flood began. Emails poured in, photos of farm kids in Louisiana rebuilding tractors with red clay parts. Notes from women in Nigeria who used the design to revive their family's crop rotation. Comments from a veteran in Nebraska who said, "This is the first time in 20 years I could repair a machine without calling for corporate help." Malik didn't respond to them all. He just kept posting, kept teaching, kept building. The final call came from Whitmore, the same man who had once told a teenage farm boy to go find someone smarter. Now his voice trembled slightly as he said, "Malik, I was wrong about you, about your father, about everything." Malik was quiet for a long time. Then he replied, "I know." A pause. "I want to make this right," Whitmore said. "What would it take?" Malik didn't hesitate. "You remember the school program you gutted in 2013? The one Dad fought for? The agricultural tech grant for black and brown students?" Yes. Bring it back, fully funded, independent oversight, no branding, no PR. Whitmore swallowed. "That's all?" "No," Malik said. "That's the minimum. Then you can start listening." A year later, the Red Clay Collective, an independent open-source agricultural initiative, opened its first physical campus in Iowa. It wasn't big, just 4 classrooms, a field, a test lab, and a barn with patch siding and a name above the door. Elijah's workshop. They didn't cut a ribbon. There was no press, just Malik and Elijah, and kids with oil on their hands ready to build. That night, Malik stood on the porch as dusk swallowed the fields. The barn lights glowed like home behind him. Elijah joined him with 2 mugs of tea. No words, just the quiet. Then finally Elijah spoke. "You proud?" Malik stared out at the horizon. "Not just of what we built, but of who we built it for." Elijah nodded. "I couldn't have done it better." Malik smiled. "You weren't supposed to." And in that silence, the kind of silence that says everything, 2 generations stood shoulder to shoulder, not in triumph, but in truth. People will tell you success looks like headlines, high rises, or speaking gigs. But sometimes it looks like a kid with no degree explaining firmware to engineers with PhDs. Sometimes it looks like a farmer finally affording to fix her land. And sometimes it looks like a machine no one wanted until it worked for everyone. So next time someone tells you you're just a farm kid, you're not qualified, you don't belong in the room, you look them in the eye and say, "That's okay. I'll build a better one."